Thank you so much. Now, if I had had the opportunity to hear you all 3 years ago, I'd have come, of course. But, you know, you get invitations from people you don't know, and you have no idea what they do. And a lot of people just organize conferences and do nothing, and I don't waste my time. I'm extremely happy to come to join the foundation for this important, timely work on rural futures, and on the title you've given me, which is Organic Rural Futures, Communities, Conservation and Livelihoods. And for me, over the last 5 decades of my work, all three have always been interconnected. Whether it was forest protection through the Chipko movement in the 70s, it was, of course, conservation. It was the ultimate conservation movement that actually got logging banned above 1,000 meters in the central Himalaya. But it was a livelihood movement. It was women defending their livelihoods. And it was a community movement. You know, if 500 of them hadn't taken turns to sit in the forest to prevent the loggers from coming in, it was the most amazing organizing I have seen, and I learned organizing from there. They did it without money. They all put a fistful of rice. And that's what kept the community going. The kitchen would keep going for months on end. Chipko lasted from 72 to 81. And they had to keep these protests going. Every patch that was threatened, they would rotate. So everyone's children and cows and fields were taken care of. And most importantly, they practiced satyagraha on a daily basis, Gandhi's amazing gift to this land. The power of truth, the force of truth, the refusal to subject yourself to unjust systems. And today, for me, injustice is the combination of the violence against the earth and violence against people of a level that is putting our very future at stake. Of course, the conservation movement began protecting tigers and elephants, thinking they were under threat. But basically, the threat to those amazing mammals was a threat to every member of that ecosystem. And that mentality is becoming a threat to the human species. We've just done an International Biodiversity Congress in Dehradun, and I invited the schools. I said it's a scientific congress, but I think it's important to have the message from the children. You know what their central message was? They made a big dinosaur at the gate of the congress. And they put a little label on the dinosaur, "Let us not go the dinosaur way." They are seeing the threat of extinction for the human species. And of course, what's happening to our rural communities is the first step of that threat. How could we witness 300,000 farmer suicides and not act? How can we on a daily basis see the forced migration? No one is leaving the village because it's an unviable place to be. It's being made unviable. You know, my mother came back to India as a refugee after the partition, and she was a senior government servant in what became Pakistan. And she said, "No, I've broken every glass ceiling for women, now I'll be a farmer." She became a farmer, and her income is what saw us through. My father was a forest conservator, but she earned more from farming than he did from a government service. And can we think of that today? The farmers' movements keep asking for being peons in government offices. So something has gone very wrong with our rural future, which is a future of the civilization, because Gandhi always reminded us that India really is a land of villages. And he worked very consciously at the concept of the Gram Swaraj and viable economies, rural economies, nature-based economies. It is 150 years of his birth anniversary, and I think it's a very good moment to do something together on this. I volunteer that if you all come, if your foundation, wildlife fund is anyway there, we don't even need to rent a place, your place is right there. Zero budget. Yeah. No effort. If Kamal Baba can come and all of you, it's something we can plan that next year, linking to Gandhi. I'm anyway writing a new little booklet to connect his thoughts on the economy with the work, thinking of those of us who spent our lifetimes on working on nature's economy, to put it together so that for the younger generations, oh, this old man, he's obsolete. You know, it changes into he's the future visionary. I have, over these 5 decades, started to see more clearly by the day the clash of 2 paradigms. One begins with colonialism, which hasn't ended, it continues in new forms. It gets aggravated 200 years ago with the fossil age. It gives birth to the mechanistic worldview and the reductionist worldview, and gives shape to economies that are extractive economies. When you talked about beyond commodification, beyond industrialism, those are all extractive economies. And on the other hand, we have nature's economy. That's how this civilization has sustained itself over millennia. That's how the amazing richness of our cultures has been given birth. And nature's economy for me is of course based on community, which is why when we talk of the Vandana, the dana is the gift of the commons. Because we're living in a time of privatizing the last drop of water, the last bit of air. I mean, I actually was very tragically, I heard a colleague, not from Vandana, but from a sister organization say, we don't have to worry about the Himalaya because we can sell our air and water. Is that the way to save the Himalaya? Or have everything else in place as well as good water and air, which you can share as the commons, because it's not that a state in the mountains will sell it to the plains. Once you start selling the water, then every village will be fighting for who owns which share. So the end of the commons, the enclosures of the commons, and the decay of community is an extremely big thing. You can extract individually, but you conserve collectively. Conservation is not possible without thinking of the commons and without forming community. And of course, the community includes the earth community. That's why I gave the theme, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, to the International Biodiversity Congress we organized. We have this legacy. It should not be allowed to be reduced to a word, but the way of organizing our economy, the way of organizing our thoughts, our politics, our democracy, not the divide and rule that is breaking us apart. And it leads, of course, to circular economies. When you talked of organic growth, Ranjit, it's so vital because growth is organic. Real growth of real things is organic. Things circulate. All nature cycles are circular cycles. There's no linear cycle of extraction in nature. And the organic paradigm, because organic is not a tool, and organic is not a product. At least for me. For some people it is. For me, it is a way of thinking. And I went back to the dictionary to understand how the word was defined. Before 1942, it was defined as the knowledge of living systems, which is ecology. 42 is when the chemicals start to rush into agriculture and the movement grew for chemical-free farming, which took that word organic from knowledge of living systems. And I won't go into details of how that emerged beyond mentioning that, the colonialism basically, at that time, there was no industrial agriculture. There were no chemicals in farming when we were colonized. But there was the attitude of extraction. And that attitude of extraction meant this land became supplier of raw materials. So all of Champaran, I did the Champaran Yatra last year for the Champaran Satyagraha's 100 years. And when I was in Champaran, a local college botany professor was sharing old books with me. The word Champaran is derived from Champa Aranya. It was a forest of the wild champa, which was chopped down for indigo cultivation. And then it was a slave cultivation. Peasants were rising. Gandhi came and supported. That was the first Satyagraha of 1917. And we ended the colonial supply of indigo. The legacy of tea plantations was also part of agriculture as commodity production. And that's why the search for how do you grow a rural economy in harmony with nature is a new search. Because the legacy is a colonial legacy where you didn't have to have harmony with nature, you didn't have to have respect for local communities and their knowledge. Decolonization, therefore, becomes a very important part of the way we define our rural future. With the addition of the chemicals came new problems. And when Albert Howard was sent to India in 1905, he was really sent to improve the commodity production. You know, there was no word for agricultural science in those days. He was called the Royal Imperial Economic Botanist. They were economic botanists. And he arrived in Pusa because the Pusa Institute was to have been set up in Pusa. And he says, the fields are fertile, they're no pests damaging the crops. I can do no better than make the Indian peasant my professor. My second teacher will be the pest. How do they function so they don't destroy our crop? Out of that learning, he did a book called The Agricultural Testament, which is often called the Bible of modern organic farming. But it's basically the distillation of centuries of Indian practices. And he pulled out the two principles that have also been the principles I learned from my works in forestry in the Chipko days. Nature works through diversity. Nature does not work by cultivating monocultures. Nature works through cycles. Howard gave it the book, the name, The Law of Return, which on the one hand culturally connects to an amazing concept in our cultures, the concept of rin. That when we are born with rin. We are born with rin, a debt to creation, because we're here, our debt to our parents, because they gave birth to us, and debt to our community, which sustains us. That's exactly what Howard called the law of return, and therefore the obligation of giving back. And I really love the way you said, CSR, no, this is our duty, this is what we have to do. It's part of being alive. Giving back is part of a dharma of being alive. Now, what has happened is the ruptures have been multiple levels. And first is the amazing illusion that really got institutionalized and is in everyone's brain and in every textbook that we are separate from nature. Whether we do it through app or what, I don't know. But that education has to be there, that we are part of nature. We'd be very dead if we were outside nature. And that's why I started the Earth University at Navanya. It began as a little school of the seed. We began as Bead Vidyapeeth, but the demand from young people was so high for how do we think differently so we can live differently. So we offer courses at the Earth University. And again, I'm very, very happy that we join hands as a common course on nature's economy, a week course every year. We have the farm, we have good organic food, you don't have the poison air of Delhi. We actually have the purest water that the forest is filtering from us, because we are next to the forest. The other separation that came out of the colonial mode of thought was the separating of the wild. And the conservation model that emerged from the United States, therefore defined wilderness as the absence of human beings. And all of the problems we would have with park management comes from that. Because a park meant where you push people out. And show me one park in India which hasn't had a conflict. Because whom did you push out? You pushed out the caretakers of the ecosystems. The knowers and experts of that ecosystem were thrown out. And they then became the enemies of that ecosystem. The separation of the forest from agriculture, I think it's 1886 or 89, the British sent Volcker to India on the relationship between forest and agriculture. And he went back and he said two things. He was supposed to both see how to improve agriculture, because colonialism means you're constantly improving, you know. You can't accept what is, you have to improve. Improving agriculture and the relationship between forests and farming. And he said, first, I can't tell you a single way to improve Indian agriculture, but having observed Indian agriculture, I can tell you many ways we can improve British agriculture. And then he said, the relationship between the forests and agriculture in India is symbiotic. It's not antagonistic. That symbiosis is what we have to bring back, because it's that symbiosis, when it's broken, you're getting the crazy conflicts. I mean, there's a high village where Navdania's members grow buckwheat, and we've been facilitating the marketing of the organic produce of our members. And I got a message just before leaving that this year there's no buckwheat, they've stopped farming because the monkey's making it impossible. Because every time there's a monkey problem in Delhi, they take the monkeys and put them into the mountains. Just make it someone else's problem and then the problem is over. So these conflicts that are being created by having separated ourselves and our farming from the forest means that over time, I mean, if you go to West UP, our farmers don't grow dal. They don't grow dal because of nilgai. So sugarcane becomes a monoculture. That's the only thing that's spreading, with all of its other problems. And of course, the separation of individual from individual, which is the breakdown of community. Now, over these many years, I started to look at agriculture in '84, after Punjab, the Punjab violence, and after Bhopal, the Bhopal tragedy. And in those days, I was working for the United Nations University, and I said to them, I was working on a program called Ecology and it was called Conflicts Over Resources, and I did a book for SAGE called Ecology and Politics of Survival, which is exactly on the theme we are talking about. And I defined nature's economy, people's economy, and the commodity economy. But the commodity economy can be sustained only as long as nature's economy and people's economy are working. And right now, I'm bringing out a new report, it will be available by 15th, on how we are at the verge of total collapse, ecologically, socially, and even in the systems that are making the money out of extraction. Just this last week, the biggest investment fund, 30% gone, BlackRock. Buyer which bought up Monsanto, and they thought by becoming bigger, they would never fail. It took one cancer case related to glyphosate, Roundup, in the United States, Johnson's case. One case, buyer lost 30%. Now you can't build an inverted pyramid of power and expect it to be stable. It has to topple. And that's what we are witnessing in our time, and every good person in finance, because we are under the assumption the finance will drive us out of it, because you can multiply money out of nothing into trillions. I mean, BlackRock became out of nothing, 6.3 trillion. And everyone's hanging their future on BlackRock, and BlackRock is collapsing. That's not a rural future. The erosion of the very base which supports that last line, the last bit is the profit. The last bit is the commodification. It can't be the driver. The driver has to be nature's economy. And redefining the economy has become now a survival imperative. So over the last few years, it's become so clear the mega problems of the planet, whether it be climate change or species extinction or the water crisis or the desertification and the soil crisis, 75% of this is related to the way we produce our food and distribute it. 75%. 75% of soil degradation and land degradation. It's definitely 75% water, in some countries 90% water. The Living Planet report has just come out, just reconfirming the evidence that 60 to 75% species gone. Now when I think of 70% freshwater species gone, what's killing the freshwater species? The pesticide runoff. Or the nitrogen runoff from nitrogen fertilizers. And of course climate change, my book Soil Not Oil, it was in Copenhagen, and people weren't talking of agriculture in the climate thing. It was about, it stopped at energy. But not only are huge fossil fuels used to do the kind of farming being done in the United States, and David Pimentel's studies are showing that it's 10 units of input of energy for the production of 1 unit of food as output. It's a negative energy equation. But then the food miles for everything you eat, you're transporting it to 10,000 miles. And the packaging, I've said it in all my campaigns. Modi ji, if you want a Swachh Bharat, you'll have to begin with a Swachh Bhojan. Because the minute you make food packaged, then in the remotest area, you're going to get piles of aluminium and plastic. Aluminium and plastic are the rucksack of the non-local food system, the non-fresh food system, which is destroying, on the one hand, our health within. So it's garbage within and garbage outside. And the regeneration of the local economy, of the rural economy, means that just because some people, I just did a calculation about Pepsi got 20,000% more than the farmer got for the potato. 5 rupees for a 50 kilogram bag this year in UP. And for a 20 gram packet of chips, 20 rupees. Just do the calculation. Now just because that's the level of margins you can get doesn't mean you let this country be drowned in garbage and our kids be drowned with junk food. This is the decisions where we need a transition. Now for every problem that has been created, and that's on the planetary side. Take the socio-economic side. Farmers everywhere are plunging. The suicides are one indicator, but it's not only Indian suicides. I read every second day a French farmer is committing suicide. In America, suicide rates of farmers are much higher than the suicide rates on the average. Australia, it's the same issue, everywhere. And the income of farmers is just crashing because it's in the design of the industrialized, globalized system where a poison cartel shapes the production of food, the cartels shape the trade, and the reason we created the IFG, the International Forum on Globalization, was to look at all of this and deal with it, and we stopped WTO in Seattle. But finally, the entry, first of Walmart and now Amazon, getting into our grocery, if you look at how much reaches the farmer, it's 1% of the consumer payment, 1%. How can there be a rural future on that model? And then of course, they're thinking, on the one hand, the Monsantos are thinking of farming without farmers because they've taken over the Climate Corporation, the Soil Data Corporation, they want drones spyware in the tractors, you don't need the farmer anymore. The drones will spray the poison. That's what the farmer did. The farmer did tractor driving. Now you have driverless tractors. You don't need the farmer. And then you don't need the displaced farmer who became a teller at a supermarket, because these will be automated too. So you have no people in the future. The reason we need to begin thinking of rural futures is from there we'll be able to think of the human future, because otherwise, in the thinking of the dominant paradigm, which can't think outside its own box, there is no place for humans. Like there was no place for the tiger, like there was no place for the elephant, like there was no place for the forest. Now there's no place for humans on that trajectory. But that trajectory is not inevitable. We have another path. We have the other path that nature has shown us. We have the other path that 10,000 years of our civilization has shown us. We have the other path that half a century of conservation-based economies have shown us. And our own work in Vandana has shown that we can not just get rid of the 50% contribution that industrial agriculture makes to greenhouse gas emissions. Of course we can reduce that, but we can do more, because while you can set up a solar energy farm or you can set up a wind farm, they are still machines and do not have the living capacity to absorb the carbon and the nitrogen from the air and put it back in the soil. Only plants do. And only through organic farming can we provide a 100% solution. I'm not going to go through details to respect time, but we've just synthesized our 30 years of work. It's biodiversity, agroecology, regenerative organic farming on every aspect. How, on the climate front, we heal the carbon cycle. We repair the broken planetary boundaries. How on biodiversity, 93% displacement. We've not just conserved the plant diversity, but by conserving biodiversity of plants, the web of life does the rest. We've got 6 times more pollinators on the Vandana farm in Dehradun than there are in the forest next door. There's a PhD that's been done on that subject. And on water, where everywhere with industrial farming, the story is declining water table. Our water table on the farm has come up 70 feet. And we are now irrigating 75% less for the little bits of 80% of our paddies do not need irrigation, they're rain-fed. But the few that do, we're reducing, because now the soil has become the ultimate water reservoir. I think it's very important to start connecting the water crisis to rebuilding organic soils. We changed the metric, because all of agriculture, including in tea, it's about yield. Because once you're only thinking commodity, you're not thinking of the quality of commodity. You're just thinking of the weight. Because what goes onto a truck or a container is weight. But if it's nutritionally empty and toxic, it's causing malnutrition on the one hand and the cancers on the other. So quality matters. And we have to have a different way of valuing quality. That's what the organic movement has done. There is an attempt to make it look like this is only for the rich. No. Not only does the last child have a right to good food, the last being has a right to good food. The pollinators have a right to good food, because when they don't get good food, they're going extinct. And now they're saying we'll be able to overcome this one. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I was just reading, just for coffee, there are 20 trillion pollinator trips to keep one commodity crop going. They want to make robotic bees. Robotic bees. First of all, they can't make all the diversity of pollinators because they don't even know what they are. And when they talk about robotic bees as if engineering a living world is to perfection, my life has been spent on the false claims to perfection of the Green Revolution. I wrote the book called The Violence of the Green Revolution. Of genetic engineering, I mean, the reason Monsanto is so fond of me is because I've done so much work on the false claims of the GMO question. The BT cotton has failed. The bollworm was more intelligent than Monsanto. It has emerged resistant. And now they're talking about, no, we're going to have robots and artificial intelligence, and it's going to be the perfect agriculture farming without farming. Just got some interesting data from Australia. So they have this robot. It took 100,000 images of differentiating between pests and weeds. And then this robot went through the fields spraying herbicide. And it killed all the real healthy crops, and the fields flourished. It got it wrong. Not a woman I know who works in a field harvests about 200 uncultivated edibles. She never gets it wrong. She knows what plant does what. But the poor robot, I mean, this putting trust in a machine higher than trust in ourselves, our responsibility, our intelligence, or nature's intelligence, I think that's the threshold we are at. And the work on nature's economy can actually show another path. So we redefined the metric. We started to say the issue is not yield per acre, but health per acre. And we started to measure nutrition per acre. We went to 200 of the Vandana farms across the country. We took all the biodiversity they were producing, took an assessment of it. Then we converted it into nutritional data. We can feed 2 times India's population through a conservation-based, biodiverse, rich agriculture. 2 times India's population. We are destroying our forests, destroying our farms, destroying our farmers, destroying our soil, destroying our water, with the claim of we are feeding the world. We are starving the world. 250 million people of India not getting enough food. 1 billion across the world. This is not a success story. And everyone's been made to grow corn and soya, corn and soya, corn and soya. 90% of it is going for biofuel and animal feed. It's not going for food. It's not going for food. Then we said the price issue is so fake, which is where the losing enterprise you were talking about, because the price is so manipulated. So we wrote another book called Wealth Per Acre on true cost accounting. The externalities of chemical farming, basically we took government data of what's the destruction. And then we took the UN valuations. It's 1.3 trillion for environmental and social destruction. But you add the cancer, the diabetes, the neurological problems, add all the food-related chronic diseases, it's another 1.5. We are talking about 3 times India's GDP as the externality that's not counted. And so we need to do another kind of accounting. And on the other kind of accounting, where you actually honestly say, okay, what does a biodiverse organic farmer have as their cost benefit, and what does a commodity chasing chemical farmer? Across the board, for different crops, the Vandana members are earning 10 times more than the chemical commodity farmers. 10 times more. 5 times higher than the Prime Minister's target. You mentioned how the Prime Minister has talked about Northeast, after Sikkim as 100% organic state, the Northeast going organic. I don't think we should allow the government to not deliver on its promises. We shouldn't leave it in their hands. But that is our money. I was told that the Northeast budget hasn't been used at all. Hasn't been used at all. So again, a second offer of a partnership. One is a course for young people on nature's economy, but maybe a conference related to Gandhi and nature's economy in Delhi sometime. But a Northeast organic Himalaya, let's work on it. And at the Biodiversity Congress in the earlier part of this month, we reaffirmed our campaign for a biodiverse organic Himalaya. You are here in the East. You take care of the Eastern Himalaya. We are in the West. If we join hands, we've covered the Himalaya without any effort. Don't have to get state bank CSR. Just our hands. Yeah? Just join hands. And my two teachers are the pollinators who leave the plant richer after they pollinate. And the plant leaves the pollinator richer with honey. That's the kind of nature's economy to develop. And for joining the hands, my teacher is the mycorrhizal fungi, which only exists in organic soils and is killed in chemical soils. In 1 cubic inch of soil, 1 cubic inch, there's 8 miles of that fungi. And it is so intelligent, it can figure out that tree is deficient, and I'm going to take the nutrition from here and carry it to that tree. And I'm saying, if only we could be as intelligent as the mycorrhizal fungi and join hands. All the false poverty we are being made to feel to cripple our action, we will shed it like that. I've never had too much resources, so I've always had to transcend money scarcity with collaborations and love and joy. And it works. It works better than money in every situation. It is more powerful, it is more lasting, it is more reliable. For the biodiverse organic Himalaya, I would be very happy for you all from the foundation and anyone else to come mid-January to Dehradun, to Navdanya, and let's plan in a serious way every transition of subsidies, transition of education, transition of planning, every little detail. We've anyway planned from Kashmir all the way to Kohima, a journey in 2020. Let's make it happen together, all our organizations, a biodiverse organic Himalaya journey. How we do it, we will plan when you all come. And then because of the Champaran Satyagraha, I took a pledge that by the time we are 100 years of freedom, 2047, we will be a poison-free, suicide-free, chronic disease-free India. And for the world, we've launched, by 2050, a poison-free farming system, because the poisons are killing not just the people who eat the food, but all of the food chain, which is all of the wildlife. These are things we can do. These are things I'll be so happy to do. I'm going to leave all our recent books. I showed you that. I just went on a marathon before this Congress. I said, let me wrap up all the work of the last 30 years. This is Origin on biodiversity and the intellectual property laws. That's been my big issue. But how we got the biodiversity laws in place internationally at the Convention on Biological Diversity, nationally the Biodiversity Act, the Farmers' Rights Act, and the ongoing issue. It's morning right now, Mr. Singhvi is arguing for Monsanto to knock out Patent Act, Article 3J, which says plants, animal seeds can't be patentable. The story is in here. And then my latest, which is oneness versus the 1%. Oneness is nature's economy. The 1% is the collapsing economy. We can think ahead. Thank you. All the biodiversity can give us healthy drinks. And here you are.
So very much, Vandana, for your thought-provoking and insightful commentary on this complex subject. And we accept this.
Sorry, so I think we were not wrong. We waited 3 years. It was a 3-year-long wait. The person that actually also said, I'm surprised you haven't brought Vandana Shiva for your conference. I said, I've tried. And he said, okay, if she doesn't come this year, I'll write a letter. That was Prince Charles. So Prince Charles, I'm part of his foundation. So he told me that I know her very well. She's a person who really deserves much more recognition than there is in India. I said, no, she's very well known, may not be stated. So he offered to write a letter influencing you, but thank you for sending me that one letter. And thank you again, and a big round of applause. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, of course, this is a very, very serious business. However, I would once again like to take the opportunity and say that you look absolutely adorable. She looked so adorable the moment she was here. She was going on with the lecture. I could just see onto her, look onto her face, and I went gaga over the fact that she looks absolutely adorable. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very big round of applause for her. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as a tribute to Dr. Vandana, Shiva, the organic growth leader, we call to the stage Mr. Jagdish Kandel and Conrad Dairies of APPL, that's Amalgamated Plantation Private Limited, to present a set of organic growth and also an e-journal which keeps its audience posted about all the latest technological advances and breakthroughs in organic farming, current happenings and forthcoming events with a special focus on the northeastern frontier region